everybody. Welcome back to our Book of John study series. This has been so much fun, and we have uncovered in these past chapters how John, this Book of John, is this beautiful, nuanced, complex, layered book that tells us about the life and story of Jesus Christ. Today, we're going to dive into chapter 11. This is a big chapter, and it's kind of the turning point of the Book of John. It starts out where Jesus gets word from his friends Mary and Martha about his other friend Lazarus. Their brother is sick. He gets word that their brother Lazarus is sick and he is dying. But then Jesus does something kind of strange. Jesus doesn't quick rush in to go save his dying friend Lazarus, as we know already in the book of John that he could do. Instead, Jesus delays. Jesus waits where he is at instead of running back to Bethany where his friend is dying. And he waits long enough until Lazarus is actually dead. And then it's that time when he decides to head back to Bethany. He gathers his disciples and then they go. And when he arrives back, he finds out that Lazarus has already been dead for 4 days. And he gets to Bethany, and there are people there, and they're grieving, and they're gathering to console Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha. And the Bible says this, when Jesus enters into town, and the Bible says, when Mary heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet Jesus. But Mary, she stayed home. You see, in her pain, Mary doesn't even want to go see Jesus. She doesn't want to go to him. But Martha, she is kind of the go-getter. She feels differently about this situation. She wants to go confront Jesus. And when she gets there, quite honestly, she's angry. She says this to Jesus. She says, "Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died." Oh, can you imagine hearing that statement? But then her next statement is even bigger. She says, "But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." It's kind of amazing, isn't it? Here is Martha, and she's angry. She's livid. Her brother has died. She has been mad at Jesus, but still she says, when she looks at Jesus, she says, "You know what, Jesus, I know even now, even my brother's been dead for 4 days, I know that you can do something about it. I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." But then Jesus says to Martha, "Your brother will rise again." Martha says, "Yeah, I know, Lord. I know. I believe that he will rise again on the last day." Here's Martha. She's a devout Jew her whole life. Like many Jews, she believed that there would be a resurrection on the last day for those who believe. But then in verse 25 of chapter 11, Jesus does something with this word resurrection. In Greek, he changes this word from resurrection as something into a present resurrection, not some future day out there, but something that is going to happen here in the present. And Jesus says to Martha, he says, "I am the resurrection and the life. Everyone who believes in me will never die." For Jesus, this resurrection thing, it's not something that's out there. For Jesus, this resurrection thing is him. It's who Jesus is, and it's what Jesus came to do. And Martha still responds in the midst of her deep, painful grief. She says to Jesus, "I believe." She believes not just in this future resurrection point, but she believes in Jesus as the resurrection in the here and now, in this presence, this belief that leads to life. And then Jesus, he wonders where Mary is, and he asks Martha to go get her. And when Mary finally decides that she's going to come, Mary sees Jesus and she echoes her sister's response. And she says to Jesus, she says, "Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died." What I love about this story is the frustration and the faith that both Mary and Martha seem to have. I love their response to Jesus, their Lord. I love that they both hold the belief and the super irritation and anger at the same time. And I love how Jesus looks at these sisters who are grieving and how he responds to this. You see, the story, it continues, and the Bible says, when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Jesus asked them, "Where have you laid him? Where have you laid my friend Lazarus's body?" And they say, "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And then we have the shortest verse in all the Bible. Jesus wept. Now, this weeping in the original Greek, it's not just like a couple of tears. It's not like a little blow his nose in a handkerchief. Instead, this wept, it is a full-on wailing. It's a full-on wailing and lamentation. Imagine Jesus doing that for just a second. Us Midwesterners, we might kind of look at Jesus in his full-on wailing, and we might kind of judge him a little bit, thinking he's a little bit too much extra, or he should take that indoors somewhere. But my friends, here's the cool thing. Jesus wept. Jesus grieved. He was deeply moved in spirit and troubled, is what the Bible said. He was hurt and he was in pain and he cried. Jesus doesn't try to numb it. He doesn't just go grab a couple beers and a pint of ice cream and try and make that pain of losing his friend Lazarus go away. Instead, he doesn't try to choke it back or pretend it doesn't exist, like he's all good and is all fine, even though Jesus knows what's coming. Instead, Jesus, he experiences the sadness. He allows the tears and the frustration to flow out of his very, very human body. And I think he does this to show us that grief and weeping, they're okay. They're not just okay, they're good for us to do. I mean, think about this. Here's Jesus lamenting, weeping, and he knows that he is the resurrection. He's already made that clear in chapter 11, but he does promise new life. But before he does that, he grieves. He becomes greatly disturbed. He ugly cries for his friend Lazarus. Why would he do that unless to teach us something about grief? To show us that something about where God is in the midst of grief, right there in the middle of it, in struggle, in suffering, and that grieving is okay. And then the next thing that happens in chapter 11 is that Jesus performs his seventh sign. This is his final sign in the book of John, his last one. And he goes to this cave where his friend Lazarus has been buried for 4 days, and he tells them to take away the stone. But Mary and Martha are like, no, don't do that, Jesus. He's been dead a long time. His body is going to stink. And Jesus convinces her to do it anyways. And what's miracle too is that she does. And then he cries out, "Lazarus, come out." And his once dead friend rises again and walks out of that tomb. And as the crowd surrounding them watch this is just too much for the chief priests and for the Pharisees. And it's at this point here in the book of John, right here at this point, when Jesus has raised his friend Lazarus from the dead, it is at this point where they start to plot to kill Jesus. Here we experience this beautiful juxtaposition between what the author wants us to see, that Jesus is bringing Lazarus to life, and that is the action that brings Jesus to death. Think about how powerful this really is. Whew. I can't wait for you to dig in and read it today. So here are my questions for you as you think about it. Number one, how do you give yourself permission to grieve? Or maybe how has grief been enacted in your own family? Is it what Jesus did? Is it this wailing and lamenting? But figure out how your family kind of does grief. And number two, why do you imagine that it was this moment when Jesus brought Lazarus back to life, that was the tipping point for the Pharisees? What do you think happened in their minds and in their bodies when they saw this happen, where they decided that the only answer was to kill this Jesus? Hey guys, thanks for joining me for chapter 11. We'll see you tomorrow in chapter 12.